everyone, and welcome to a NED Talks platform. We're here today doing something a little bit different, which is a panel of experts to talk about food sensitivity testing. This is hosted by CNSLab, and we've got scientific advisors from CNSLab and Nikki Esther as well. The panel is going to be hosted by Justin Roberts, who's the Editor-in-Chief for the Nutrition Evidence Database. So I'll hand over now to Justin, who's going to be asking questions of various members of our panel. So thank you, Justin.
Yeah, thanks and welcome everyone. So this is a panel discussion around food sensitivity testing, or FST. So for those that are not familiar with FST, I'm going to direct this one to Nigel. Can you maybe give us a brief outline of what FST is all about?
Sure. Food sensitivity testing is all about looking for evidence of a loss of tolerance to some of the food items that we're eating. So what I mean by that is, instead of treating food as something harmless, our immune system, temporarily at least, is reacting to food like it would do as a pathogen. So we're mounting an immune attack. And this is characterized by the presence of high levels of food-specific IgG antibodies. And once this process has been started, so we have these high levels of antibodies, they will lead to the formation of excess immune complexes. And these complexes will start driving low-grade systemic inflammation. And evidence suggests it is this inflammation that is the key to driving symptoms which are associated with food sensitivity.
So with this in mind, how and why do you think food sensitivities occur?
I think that's a complex question because the whole question of tolerance and what do we react to, what we don't react to is an incredibly complex immune principle. What we do know is that in a modern context, we are more and more prone to inflammatory conditions. We're seeing that as a population. But the primary driver for food sensitivity is believed to be increased gut permeability and leaky gut syndrome, whereby the gut mucosa is become damaged and opened up. And that's letting large intact molecules, including food molecules, through the gut wall, where it's exposed to the underlying immune system. And this is where it triggers the generation of IgG antibodies.
So with that in mind, Nigel, if you think about someone who's never heard of FSTs before, can you just tell us a little bit about the process? What is an FST test? What do they have to do?
Well, what we do is we use the analysis of, or looking for the presence of these IgG antibodies, which, as we said, are specific to certain foods. So basically, you have a very large panel of looking for all the potential foods that are common in the diet, and look for specific antibodies to those foods and to assay the relative levels of those foods. And that's important because IgG responses are our frontline immune response. That is our protective mechanism. So we make these type of antibodies to every foreign substance we've ever been exposed to. What we're doing with food sensitivity testing is to identify the actual levels of these antibodies so that we can show higher than normal levels.
Excellent. And I mean, is FST mainstream? And if not, is there any reason why it's not maybe universally accepted?
This is one of the biggest problems with food sensitivity testing. Now, on one hand, it's been around for probably 30 years, and it's been tested worldwide by many laboratories on hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. And yet, as we speak, it is still not universally accepted by particularly the allergy societies. And they often quote the lack of or insufficient robust studies to make its clinical utility more widely used. The problem I have with that is, whilst we do always need more research, there is actually a wealth of published research to answer that question. But most of those statements seem to be very out of date. and they're referring to very old papers. I'm not referring to any of the wealth of new data that is out there. So it really is a time to reevaluate that kind of clinical evidence.
Oh, good point. So with that in mind, do you think there will come a point, like with allergy testing, that FST may be an accepted form of testing to support chronic conditions in the future?
We can only hope so, because when we look in clinical practice, which we'll no doubt hear about later, it can be a very powerful tool. It is a means of alleviating symptoms for patients who often have tried every other more mainstream course with unsuccessfully. So it's something that should be available for a variety of conditions, and it can be a very successful treatment. So we can only hope that it will be made available at a more GP level at some point in the future.
So with that in mind, we've actually got two practitioners on the panel as well, Kirsty and Britta. So I'm going to direct this next question to Kirsty. So in your practice, what circumstances would you use, or do you use FST?
Thanks, Justin. So I work a lot with gastrointestinal issues such as IBS, so irritable bowel syndrome, but exactly as Nigel mentioned, intestinal permeability. And the gold standard for those are generally a low FODMAP diet. But often I'm finding that clients are coming to me where they are reacting to foods outside of a FODMAP diet. And this is where a food sensitivity test has been really instrumental in helping them reduce their symptoms and return to normal life. So this is where I use it particularly well, and I've used it extensively for nearly 3 years now.
And just following on from that, when basing a diet, if you like, on FST results, what impact have you seen on client outcomes?
So largely, I've had some really good successes. What is really important is to help the client put together a food plan that they can work with, because often we're seeing quite extensive red flagged foods, which means they need to eliminate those for 2 months. So it's quite important that I help them in terms of applying that elimination for the full 2 months. And then the results, when they're applying it well, have really been great. So I've seen reductions in bloating and various other gastrointestinal symptoms, as well as reduction in things like migraines, where people have really been struggling with migraine or migraines. So I've seen some really great results, and this is why I'm having repeated use of this test. It is an expensive functional test, but it's a really good one when you ident it for all the right reasons.
Brilliant. And Britta, in your practice, do you use it for any other reasons, or is it similar to Kirsty's?
Well, for me, I'm a private GP in Richmond, and especially since COVID, it's been amazing, the onslaught of amount of people who are coming and saying that they don't know where to get help anymore because they're having so many difficulties with different, mainly bowel issues, but otherwise sometimes wheezing or skin issues. And yes, in this case, the food sensitivity testing has been really, really amazing and very helpful, especially because the main thing is I've been working together with one of the gastroenterologists, and even she says, how come there's so many celiac diseases coming up? And I do think the chronic inflammation that has been coming out of our COVID pandemic has led to people who might have a susceptibility switching on things that were, in the genetic thing, then bringing things to light. So I work together, making sure that there's nothing like that I'm missing. And then after that, if by just sheer elimination of the major actors, that's where the the food sensitivity testing has been really helpful, because usually when they say, well, avoid milk, then they go to the milk alternative. And it's terrible when you're actually sensitive to the milk alternatives. So, it's been massively helpful in guiding people in the right way, because your automatic, then I'll take almond, usually ends up being a real massive, and then so it's been very helpful into doing it in a very scientific and positive fashion, because otherwise, without knowing the other sensitivities that one might have, you go down a rabbit hole and just very confusing and difficult. So it's been great.
I was going to ask you then, so, you know, what sort of foods do you commonly see come up? I know it's going to be individual, but what are the common foods that tend to come out?
Well, of course, it's the usual. Unfortunately, a lot is milk protein, so that a lot of people are allergic to all three, like the cow, sheep, and goat. Then egg white, and of course, a lot of gliadin. So again, that would have been a bit of a big difficulty for others if they say, yes, avoid wheat, but then gliadin, we know we should be avoiding the other gluten-containing foods as well. Interestingly enough, to a lot of people's chagrin, potato and pea is rearing its ugly head, and then of course a lot of the nuts and so it's been actually quite difficult for a lot of people, because a lot of the milk alternatives are not actually an alternative for them. So it's been, so if you're dairy, if you're supposed to be avoiding that, yeah. So those are the things that have been really very, very obvious over the last 6 months, 8 months.
Very interesting. And just to finish with, just coming back to you, Nigel, for someone listening to this that might be interested in following up and finding out more about FSTs, where would you advise they start?
Well, of course, there's a wealth of information available on the internet. I think I would urge some caution, because one of the problems I believe associated with food sensitivity testing is there's a lot of misinformation out there. I believe there are a lot of claims which are made which are probably not substantiated. So you do need to go to a reliable source. Obviously, from our own perspective, from my own company's perspective, CNSLab, there's a lot of information on our website where people can go and have a look and see exactly what this type of testing involves, and get some idea of what the diet regime would look like.
Brilliant. So with that in mind, I just want to thank the panel. This has been a really interesting talk, short and brief, but it's to the point and it's really informative to those listening. If you want to find out some more information, also look at the nutrition evidence database. There's some really good articles on there on IgG testing, and I hope you found this chat useful.